Welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hi everyone, Jesse Green here. Welcome back to the Savvy Dentist Podcast. Terrific to have you here for another week. And I'm super excited because today we're talking about all things financial. And we're talking a lot about reinvention as part of that as well, which sounds like an odd mix. But my guest today is an expert when it comes to creating financial freedom and wealth. But on top of that, he's had to go through a considerable amount of upheaval and change in his life. And he's got some really wonderful thoughts and wisdom around recreating one's life, reinventing yourself, if you will. And our guest today is none other than Damion Lupo, and his website is damionlupo.com, and we'll be getting into that conversation in depth shortly. Now, before I do get into that conversation with Damion, I would love to let you guys know about the Savvy Dentist app. It's a new app that's been released on iOS and Android, and on that app you can get access to all of our back catalogue of podcasts, our blogs, and a heap more stuff is going to be coming down the pipeline for that. So really do head across to your app store of choice and download that. It's a free app, and so it's right there for you guys as a resource. In addition to that, we'd love to see you in the Savvy Dentist Facebook group, of course. It's where we continue the conversation and we have training, tools, and tips. And we'd love to see you there as well. So a couple of things there as resources for you, and please do take advantage of those because they're there for you. And that's what we're aiming to do, is to help you guys create not just a business that you love, but a life that you love as well. And that's really our whole ethos. So our conversation today is Damion Lupo. He is a master, as I said, of all things financial, as well as helping create a life that you love through reinvention. And without any further ado, here's Damion. Damion Lupo, welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and hang with us. How's things with you, my friend?
Jesse, they're good, man. It's really good to be here. I'm excited to see where we go with this. And I think I was actually going to try to interview you instead of you interviewing me and see what happens. What do you think about that?
Well, we can do that as well. But I think that would be a bit of a disservice in a sense because you've got so much to share. I've got in my hot little hands right here, I've got two of your books. One is called Reinvented Life. The other one is called The Quick and Dirty Guide to Gold and Silver. And I know that your life has been a journey like everyone's, and I know that there's been never a straight line in terms of life. So lots of twists, lots of turns. So before we get into your main work, which is really helping people with their wealth creation, financial literacy, and so on, which is your body of work these days, I wanted to ask you the backstory. What prompted the writing of these two books, particularly Reinvented Life? What was the genesis for that?
Well, the reason that I've written books over the years, and my very first one, if you ever want to see the single worst design book in the history of publications, is Maverick Mistakes in Real Estate Investing. And I wrote that book in the middle of my start, like 4 years into real estate investing, because I wanted to memorialize what I'd learned and the mistakes I'd made so that I didn't make them again. And if you write a book, you really clarify your thinking. As much as we think we know about something, it's really fascinating how little we know when we start writing about it and we go, wow, maybe I need to think deeper and do some more research. So all of the books have been that sort of started there. And Reinvented Life was no different. It was the book that I wrote to get all of the lessons I learned after I lost $20 million in 2008 and had to restart my life and reinvent it. And I didn't want to do that again because you can imagine losing $20 million is not fun. It's painful. And I wanted to learn so I could never do it again. And then I could also share that with other people that wanted to maybe reinvent their life without losing $20 million and potentially give them some of the questions that really need to be answered if we're going to do that type of reinvention.
I think that's a really good point. And to your point of writing a book, clarifying your thinking, I think that is absolutely true. When I wrote my own, it was, as you say, I thought I knew that subject matter really well, but it's only when you sit down and clarify your thoughts. It's a very sobering and humbling experience, actually, when you go to do that. And you think, oh, hang on.
Yeah, it's and it can be painful too, and especially like with Reinvented Life, there's a lot of books out there that have stories, and then there are how-to books. And what Chris and I did with Reinvented Life was ask the really hard questions that we learned from our process, so you understand why we're asking the questions based on what we went through. And really, we ask the questions because if you listening right now have answers inside you, if somebody will help you ask the right questions. It's not that somebody has the answers answers for you. It's that you have them. You just have to be pried open. And that's what this book is all about.
Yeah, there's a great quote that smart people have good answers, whereas geniuses ask good questions, right? So I think the ability to ask good questions is key. And I hope today I'm going to be able to ask a few good ones of you, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about losing $20 million, because I can't let that go unremarked upon. That is a huge chunk of money. Firstly, I'm assuming it was related to the GFC and the meltdown and all the rest of it at 2008 time. But what did you feel when you went? Or was it a completely visceral experience? Was it as gut-wrenching as I think it would be? Because it sounds gut-wrenching. I'm just curious to know what it was like living it.
I think, Jesse, I had all of the emotions in the world. I mean, there was bliss and making all the money and then falling off a cliff where I watched over a year where my net worth went from positive 5 million to negative 5 million. And that process of being in denial and not being willing to cut losses and say, this isn't working, I just kept chasing things. And people do this in business all the time, where they're not willing to acknowledge that they were wrong. Unfortunately, a lot of medical practitioners, a lot of dentists, because in the dentist profession, there's so much education required. There, oftentimes what I find, and this can be hard to hear, but a lot of people in medicine tend to be terrible investors because they think that they are so smart, and they have a totally different skill set in medicine than in investing or money. And so they make really big mistakes because their ego is driving. I know what this is like because my ego drove me off a cliff. And so I can relate to this, where I thought I was so smart and I wasn't willing to say, hey, you know what? I totally made a mistake, or a lot of mistakes, and let me stop. I just kept going and going and going until I've lost all this money and had to start over. But the other weird emotion was denial, where after the money was gone, I still pretended that it hadn't happened, because it's so embarrassing when our identity is tied to the thing that we've done, the thing that our title. And when we mess up, we don't want people to know, because then they're going to judge us and our significance tends to be crushed. So that was a really painful process, but it was also the most important one, because I was willing to say what's really true. And that's the key question for going conscious and for shifting anything, asking what the truth is. And that was when everything changed, was when I asked what is true. And what was true is I really didn't like myself. I was running a game of my life based on really no morals, no ethics, no values, no mission, except for more.
There's a lot in that, mate. And there's obviously been a lot of learnings in there. So you found out that what is true is that you didn't like yourself. How did you get to that point, though? I mean, because it seems to me like we all get caught up in the rat race of life. We get caught up on the treadmill. Was it that you were just doing the same things that everyone else does? Or was there a point where you felt you deviated from your core purpose in life? And the reason I'm asking this question is there'll be people on this show who will be going, wow, I feel like I'm on the treadmill, just going, trying to get a bigger car, bigger house. That's that whole expression, to buy things I don't need with money I don't have, to impress people I don't like, that whole expression. And that may be true for some people. I'm sure people don't consciously go out and do that, because people don't do that. But when you realize that you were not the person you wanted to be, the thing you discovered that you didn't like yourself, was there a point in time where you deviated sharply and became someone you didn't like, or was it a slow process where you just kind of veered slowly down a path and ultimately found yourself at a destination that you didn't like?
It's a really good question. Here's what happened, and this happens for a lot of people, because it's a default mechanism. We tend to satisfy our need for significance and security as our primary driver. We ignore the other pieces of our basic needs, and so these two drive everything. And when I was starting out, or even when I was in the middle of that career, making all that money and creating the wealth, my focus was on shiny cars to prove to other people, like you're talking about, that I was valuable. And it was the security of more. It was the nesting. It was having the stuff, having the money. And so I didn't have a mission. I mean, truly, my mission wasn't based on anything there, because there really wasn't one. And there was no real values. One of the questions, the big question, what is true? What is true is I didn't know what my values were. I had to ask, and I had to dig in. We hear this a lot in society now, the mission, vision, and values. And it's really important to hear over and over, especially if you haven't done it, because if you don't have it, you're just going to keep going in a circle. And the circle is going to get bigger. It might get faster in that rat race. You've got to start with something. My vision was literally taking people that were successful, that had big houses and they had castles and they had these lifestyles of the rich and famous, and I modeled them, and I became them. I became their wealth. I became who they were. The problem is I became them. And I say that because when I looked under the hood, I realized in retrospect that the ethics and values that were driving these people were terrible. And I was becoming these people. And it's no wonder that I was such a wreck, because I hadn't really gone underneath. And our inside generates an external projection of what's going on. When the focus is on the ends justify the means, that it's about having the big house, or it's about having a ton of money or more credentials or whatever that is, if you don't understand who you are, it's really terrifying what path you'll take, because you'll take any path that you need to, regardless of the consequences, regardless of the carnage. And so I learned that you have to start with that deep-seated who am I, and then you can use that to guide you. And it's really interesting how easy it is to make decisions, and how you can filter people and opportunities in business when you actually have those basic questions answered, like, what do I value? Who am I? What are my guidelines? What are my ethics, my morals? What am I actually trying to get to, and why? Starting there changes everything.
I really resonate with that, Damion. I think that for people listening to the show, the reason I resonate with this so much, and this is a recurring theme that comes up on our podcast a bit actually, is because I think we live in a world of comparison. And it's in social media and other things. People's Facebook life is not their real life. We all know that. We all get that. And yet, we compare our average day or our worst day to someone's most epic day. And so we have this sense of inadequacy. And sometimes people who see that can start, as you say, going down and chasing things that may not really resonate with them, or may not actually be in alignment with their values. So for people who are listening to this podcast, I'd really encourage you to go back and listen to the last 30 or 40 seconds of Damien's advice there, because I think getting clarity about who you are, what's important to you, what means the most to you, is going to be your true north. Is going to allow you to have a filter to make decisions, to evaluate opportunities, and to keep you on that path. So hopefully you can avoid the $20 million crash that Damion avoided. So I want to ask you, Damion, when you're sitting there and you've lost all that money and you have that moment of truth and you realize that, hey, the person in the mirror is not the person I really want to be, what did you do practically to go, this is not where I want to be. I want to reestablish myself. I want to get back to where something that I feel comfortable with, who I'm happy to be. What did you actually do, and what was your process around that? I don't mean that in a step one, do this, step two, do that. Not in a formulaic, prescriptive way, but what lessons or insights did you have to go through? What growth did you have to go through to find your way out of that dark hole?
First thing I did was I decided consciously that I had to stop lying, and mostly I was lying to myself. In 2010, after a couple of years past the meltdown, I got fired from a volunteer position on a political campaign. And after that happened, I saw people writing about this on the internet saying Damion got fired. And I responded and said, no, I didn't. I resigned. And so I was defending the lie. And I finally, at some point, thought, this is crazy. I can't fix a lie. I can't change this. And so I owned it. So the first step for anybody in any situation is a shift into total self-responsibility and owning it, whatever it is, and saying, this is my life. These are my choices. I'm pretty hardcore about this. And sometimes people will push back and they'll say, well, I didn't cause a hurricane. How can I be responsible? And my response is, you may not be responsible for the thing, but you're responsible for how you interpret it and how you react to it. And so I had to take responsibility for everything that was going on, even those things that I had literally no control of. And then the next step is asking for help, because I couldn't see my blind spots and I couldn't see what was missing. And so I had to get help from somebody to help me see what I was missing. And then really looking at the reality. So the reality that for most people they want to ignore is numbers. And when I started looking at numbers, I mean, I remember a crazy experience where I was looking at my overhead and I was spending $75,000 per month. And a friend of mine that was my accountability partner looked at my stuff and he said, so what are you going to do now that you've fallen off a cliff? And I said, well, I've got my 75,000 down to 22,000. He said, it's still $22,000. And I said, I couldn't cut anymore. And so the truth was we had to go and do a surgery on my balance sheet and my profit and loss, my cash flow statement, that's hard to do because we tend to get addicted to our lifestyle. And it took other people helping me see things and asking hard questions like, why are you doing that? Why are you spending this? Everybody has that in their life, in their financials. And it's one of the places that we tend to ignore and we don't want to share because it's embarrassing to see what we're addicted to.
Yeah, and I think the clarity around the numbers, again, is a really important thing. So, again, do you feel that in your work that you do helping people understand the numbers and become financially literate, where is it that people don't quite get the numbers? Is it they just don't want to look at them, or is it they get confused by them? Or is it a case of, I'll just take care of business and the numbers will take care of themselves? So I'm curious to understand, because if we don't look at the numbers, it's like driving a Formula One car and being blindfolded, right? The likelihood of crashing is very, very high. So what's the problem?
The problem is most people tend to focus on the top line, the ego, and they talk about business as if it's a top line event. And that's crazy. It's really about the bottom line of a business. That's what's actually happening at the end of the day. Great example. I was in Europe with some new friends, and we were talking about this medical practice that they had. And this guy was telling me how he was doing so great that they had $60,000-$70,000 per month coming in, and it was growing. It should be 100. And I said, this is fantastic. So how much money do you have in the bank? And he looked at me and he said, you're not listening to me. You don't understand. And I said, I do understand. What's the actual bottom line? Because that's the reality. That's what the shakeout is after you've done all the dumb things you're going to do in your business. The reality of this business either producing for you or eating you alive shows up on the bottom line, the net cash flow. And that's the piece of financials that most people are missing in their personal and business life is the actual cash flow. So he came down the next day and he said, you really made me mad last night. But I realized the problem with my business is I don't have any damn cash and I need to fix that. And I said, you're right. Your ego has been telling you your business is good. The reality, though, is that your business is not good, and you're basically working for your business. It's not working for you.
Again, I think you're speaking our language very clearly there, Damion. So, Damion, when it comes to the bottom line, obviously, we've got to look at the revenue and the expenditure of that. So is it mainly that people are just not paying attention to the expenses, or is it they're just not looking at all, or why is it that we get caught up with the vanity metric of revenue?
What people tend to do, and I've had some partners in the past where the main focus was revenue and then not paying taxes. So the focus was on bleeding their business dry by expensing everything. And it didn't really matter what they were expensing. So I was with Jay Geyer, who does a lot of training for dentists in the United States. And it was funny. There's like 1,000 dentists, and then there's Damion. And one of the things he said was he'll spend money if it's likely to generate revenue. And if we look at our spending, our expenditures through that lens, and then we say, okay, prove it. Like if I'm going to buy this thing, this device, or I'm going to invest in people, how are they going to make me money? How is this thing going to create revenue? That's the big difference where most businesses, people tend to spend to avoid tax, and it really screws them up because they're not asking the right question. What can I spend that's going to drive additional revenue? And how do I know that? How am I tracking it? People tend to be really fast spending money just to avoid taxes. And it's a fatal flaw that I see almost in every business.
Yeah, and again, spending for the sake of spending is crazy. I think, really there's two purposes of $1. One is to generate a customer or to keep a customer, really. In that sense, you've got to be looking at ROI all the time. So in your work with financial literacy, in the work that you do, there'll be people who listen to this podcast. Some will be in their 40s and 50s and beyond, but a good chunk of people listening to this podcast will be in their mid-30s. They've been in dentistry for a couple of years, up to 10 years or thereabouts, and they might have just bought themselves a practice, and they might be just really establishing the foundations of their wealth. What things need to be in place to put a platform or a foundation in so that they can continue to grow? Where should people start their process when it comes to creating wealth?
Most important thing I've found for people is when they look around. If we look around and we actually analyze the people, those core people that are around us, we're a reflection of them. And if we want to have wealth, we need to look around and see if the people that are around us are doing the same thing that we are right now, or if they're doing something that's actually creating wealth if we're not doing that. The thing that really screws people up and it makes them uncomfortable is the idea of shifting the environmental impact and the influencers. sometimes that means family, and people don't want to do it. And so my feedback is you're going to have the same life you've had the last 2 years, the next 20 years, if you don't change who's been in your life the last 2 years. That's a big shift for people. The truth is, though, we absorb other people, just like my mentors in the first 10 years of my career. And we can change that. It's very, very fast to start asking, who can I put myself around and who can I spend time being influenced by? But we tend not to do that because of momentum. So if you want to create long-term wealth, find people that have actually created it and start to become valuable to them and be around them. It really does change things because it's called osmotic adaptation. It's what we call it in reinvented life. By osmosis, we become these other things. It kind of seeps into us.
That's fantastic. So again, that whole average of your peer group is going to be key. So again, just thinking about the people listening to this podcast, they're in their business, they're earning their income. Is there a particular strategy beyond hanging around with wealthy people, which we all agree is going to be key and important? What sort of financial mistakes do they need to be mindful of? What sort of potholes lie on the road ahead of them? And equally, what sort of opportunities? Again, I know that there's going to be, I'm not talking about investment opportunities per se, but opportunities for growth and learning should they be looking at taking as they go on that journey?
Well, one of the things that you mentioned, you were talking about some training that you'd recently done. I think a lot when I see people in their 30s and 40s investing, oftentimes I see them chasing a shiny deal where they're investing in something, and instead of investing in themselves with their education, with not necessarily university, but I'm talking about seminars and people that can teach them different skills and different tools to use for investing, I see them throwing money at things that look exciting and look sexy, and they have good returns. The problem is it can work or it doesn't work, but you haven't learned anything. And that's when somebody says, "What, I've got 50,000 or I've got 100,000, what should I do?" And my answer is, go educate yourself so you've got the confidence, because you can make money, but that doesn't do you any good. People come to me all the time with 2, 3, 4, 5, $10 million, and they're scared to death because the way they got it was almost an accident. And if it wasn't an accident, it took them 20 or 30 years, and they know they don't have another 20 or 30 years to recreate it. So it's about developing our own muscle. It's not about making the right decision on which tool or which investment to buy.
Again, I love that, because going back to first principles, if you can learn the principles, you can understand those principles, then whatever the environment or the situation you find yourself in, you've got that decision-making filter, you've got that framework to work within. So, Damion, just fast forward a little while. You've lost your $20 million. You've gone through that moment of reinvention, and you've obviously had to learn to look at yourself, evaluate yourself, ask what's true, stop lying to yourself, become very clear on the numbers, like we've just been talking about. For people listening to this show, what were the hardest, most difficult lessons beyond the ones we've already discussed that you had to get au fait with? So we've spoken about not lying to yourself, being okay with yourself, understanding the numbers. Where else did you need to look to get back to the point where you currently are?
I remember one of the things that I had to do is I had to understand how to delegate the right things and take control of the right things. And really simplifying everything. So one of the things that is a big mistake, people think that finances is confusing or it's too complex, and they tend to abdicate responsibility and they hand it over to somebody instead of really owning it and understanding it. When I worked with my current accountant and bookkeepers to set things up, I am really clear every week and sometimes every day what's going on. And there's no mystery. I know whether things are converting. I know whether there's revenue. I know what my expenses are. I don't have drips or holes in my ship. It's because I pay attention to it, and we tend to get more of what we pay attention to. So that was a big part of that shift. It wasn't running so fast. It was simplifying and then keep paying attention to the narrow things. And this had everything to do with saying no to most things, saying no to what I paid attention to, saying no to what I was going to engage with and who I was going to engage with. It's the difference between success and super success and actual fulfillment and peace is saying no to almost everything and really keeping focused on what matters the most. That's what people have a hard time with because of Facebook, the highlight reel that we're comparing ourselves to. We tend to chase everything because of the fear of missing out. And it might be well and good to delete a little Facebook in your life versus adding more hours of it.
Hallelujah, brother. I agree 1,000,000% on that. As wonderful as all the social media tools are, and I'm not here to knock social media, I use it too, but there is a place for it and there's a place to leave it aside too. I want to talk about attention though, because one of the things that this is just a personal observation, it's not necessarily a statement of fact, but just one of the things I observe in my own life and in some of the people that I deal with is that attention seems to be a scarce resource, and the ability to actually concentrate on one thing for a little while becomes harder and harder, whether it's multiple distractions, alerts, beeps, notifications, and so on, Facebook, like we just mentioned. So when you were learning to pay attention, how was that process? Was that an easy thing for you to do? Because again, I know that I don't want to gloss over it because it's easy to say, oh yeah, just pay attention to this. And it sounds so easy, right? It's simple but not easy. So can you walk me through how you pay attention specifically, and is that an easy thing for you, or is it something you've had to learn to get good at?
What's fascinating is it's a simple answer. It's turning off all the noise. And how do we turn off the noise? I have a no ding policy. If you come into my world and you start dinging, you're exited out. And if you won't exit, I leave. I mean, literally no dings. You around me with a ding, it's going to be a problem.
So hang on, hang on. We'll just say I've got a no dinging policy. So if someone comes into your house and their phone makes a beep, they're out.
No, I say, look, this doesn't work in here, and so let's make a choice. Either you want to hang out and we're going to be here, or go play with your phone out somewhere else. I think we've gotten addicted to it. We're afraid. People oftentimes use the excuse, well, if my kids need me, and I go, what happened before cell phones? Do you think that your kids, like if there's an emergency, there's an emergency phone number, but people are a Twitter tweet or something like that's the same emergency that people have become addicted to. So simple. I turned all my dings off. And when I studied Gary Keller's book, The One Thing, really closely, where I have this one thing. I know what my one thing is. I don't have 50 things that I'm working on. I have 50 things in a parking lot that I know I'm going to get to, but they live in the parking lot. They don't live in front of me. I'm not chasing all these damn squirrels around. And that's what most people are doing, is they're chasing squirrels as the dings chime in and make them totally distracted.
Yeah, so I think we need a no ding head policy. I think we can absolutely go with that. But I think that comes back to the power of focus, the ability to say no, the ability to understand that one thing. So again, I really endorse and resonate with that. I wanted to talk a little bit about your world of gold and silver, because I can't let that go unremarked as well. You've got this book, and I love the title, The Quick and Dirty Guide. So tell me about Dirty, because it's just a great title.
Dirty is really about the candid conversation for anything. So when we say quick and dirty, it's getting to the point and it's saying what needs to be said. Jack Welch, who ran GE for many years, said that's one of the missing things in business is candor. And so when I wrote that book and I talk about gold and silver, I talk about the reality of gold and silver, what it is, what it's not, who it's for, if you should have it, and why it matters. And it was just, my opinion, my experience, having been in this business basically since before I was born, with seeing piles of silver and gold as a child, I started to become curious about it. And the more I studied monetary policy globally, I realized how the central banks and the governments are debasing the money they're basically printing, what that means is that what you're doing is you're transferring your hard work into paper, and some machine, it's called a central bank, is printing it faster than you can ever create it. And so you've got to be smarter than just going and working for these paper dollars. And that's where gold and silver comes into play. It's an important hedge against that craziness.
Yeah, I read in your book you're discussing about how President Nixon at the time broke the link between the US dollar and the gold standard, and how that just basically meant that the dollars and the currencies of today are essentially not backed by anything in particular. Do you think that had a huge impact, or any impact at all, in what we saw in 2008?
And everything that we're seeing, every one of these crashes it's all based on the Federal Reserve, it's the European Central Bank, it's all the central banks, it's their policy of artificially pumping just junk. It's fiat currency. If we didn't have the artificial money going out, we wouldn't have had the Goldmans, the AIGs, all these institutions with the ability to just go and speculate, because there would have been consequences. So when things were backed by gold globally, there was a check and balance. If you made a mistake, your gold went away. And that's one of the things that it really truly kept things in line, kept politicians from going crazy with their spending. So yeah, 2008 was an absolute direct. It was an effect from the policy of the Federal Reserve, the different central banks. I don't know that that's going to change until it absolutely collapses. So it's just sort of something that everybody's become addicted to, the ability to print money, and it allows for a lot of people to get away with a lot of things. The problem is the impact on you listening right now. You have to decide how to do something for yourself personally. We can talk about big picture or talk in superlatives or conjecture, but we need to figure out what to do personally. And what we do personally is hedge against that somehow. And that's where gold and silver comes into play.
Yeah. Now, I've been looking at your website, Damion, and for listeners, head across to DamionLupo.com, 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 and you've got a treasure trove of goodies on your website, mate. Tons of interviews, tons of resources. And one of the things I'd love to be able to point our listeners to is if they wanted to get some clarity about what they could do specifically around this, you mentioned we need to have some specificity. Where would you suggest people start by having a look at your website? What's the one thing that they could really get started?
So it's not on the website. It's on a different website that I have called reinvention.net. So it's kind of tied into the book. And the reason I want you to go there's one thing there, and it's a downloadable workbook that's all the questions from Reinvented Life. So reinvention.net is the actual work. So let me tell you what this is not. It's not the 4-hour work week where you get to hack your way into anything. This is the actual work. It's another 4-letter word.
Yeah.
So,
does anyone believe the 4-hour work week? Sorry.
It's awesome stuff. But the problem is you think I'm going to create this great life with 4 hours a week. No, you're not. I mean, let me just tell you, you're not going to do it. It's going to take you 40 years to get to those 4 hours. So you're still going to have to put in the 40 years of 2,000 or 3,000 hours a week or a year. So going and doing the work in the workbook, I'm basically giving you the ability to go straight to the questions, which is what you have to work on. I'm amazed at how often people will read a book like Reinvented Life and they'll skip over the questions. They're just looking for the stories. And I go, that's interesting, but that's like watching television. You're not really doing the work. You're just watching it. And if you want something to change, you've got to do the work. I mean, there's a theme here. It's the work, and so that just get that workbook, download that workbook and ask the questions and then get a pen out and actually write them.
Yeah, ladies and gents, I'd really commend that to you. I have read Reinvented Life and it is a cracking read and there's lots of good exercises and questions in there as well. So please do go and get that workbook. That's going to be great. Now, Damion, I wanted to ask you around reinvention and coming back to that theme, which is kind of the theme I've wanted to take today because, as I mentioned earlier, that there'll be various people who, for one reason or another, will be looking to make some changes in their life. Maybe they've reached a point where they have to make a change, or maybe they're just not wanting to get to the point where their hand is forced. What I wanted to ask you as you've gone through this journey is it a thing that anyone can do? The questions that you ask, are they questions that anyone can answer and make some significant changes with? Is it going to be just for a select few that really get the most out of it, or is it something that anyone can really do? And specifically, is there anything that they should be mindful of as they go on that journey?
Yeah, it's like anything. I mean, I had an experience a few years ago where one of my siblings got into really bad troubles with drugs and asked for help, wanted to do rehab. And this is a major reinvention when you go through rehab and you're wanting to stop doing drugs. And the problem was she wasn't done. She had not fully committed. And so is this for everyone? Is getting off of drugs for everyone? No, because some people are not done. And if you're not done with what you're currently doing, then don't bother. I mean, this is literally going to be a waste of time because you're going to get frustrated with nothing happening, or you're going to blame me for giving you questions that made you mad. So I honestly, if it's only for you if you're truly done and you said, there is no other option. I have to change. This is a must. This is not a could or a should or a maybe or a possible. This is an absolute will. When that's the case, yeah, this is for you. It's because this is what's going to shift you. It's called you. And it's you doing the work.
Yeah, I love that. Hallelujah. Fantastic. That 4-letter word. It's a cracker. It's a good one. I love it. So, Damion, what does the future hold for you now? You've obviously been through this incredible catharsis. You've obviously rediscovered who you are, found some purpose in your life again, and reconnected with that. And you've obviously been tremendously successful in the years following that difficult period. What does the world look like for you now?
There's a shift in the focus away from the significance. I mean, there was some security, but it was mostly significance. That's why I bought the Ferrari. That's why I had all these houses and the just that lifestyle. The shift has really gone to contribution, and the focus is on freeing 1 million people from financial bondage. And it's a bit of an arbitrary number, but a lot of people think if I'm a millionaire, life is good. Well, to me, being a millionaire or a billionaire has more to do with the number of people that you're impacting. So ultimately, those million ripple into 1 billion. And my idea is along the lines with Peter Diamandis that the new billionaire isn't $1 billion in the bank; it's 1 billion lives that you've improved, and that's my focus. It's the contribution piece. It's not about the money takes care of itself. And this is not woo. This is not me regurgitating the secret or something. This is me understanding the laws of the universe, that if you're willing to be on purpose, not just passionate, because I mean, crap, you can be passionate, be running enthusiastically in the wrong direction.
Completely.
And that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about your purpose, why you're here. I know I'm here to empower people with the confidence to be financially free, not to teach them how to go steal and rob a bank or to work 4 hours a week. I'm literally here to help people understand how to develop the muscle so that they're truly free. That's why I'm here. That's all the work I do. And so that's what I'll be doing until I stop breathing, empowering people and freeing people. It's literally the modern day slavery and bondage that I'm on a mission to emancipate.
I love that. So fantastic. So I think you're going to be the new coach. So pushing out a few extra reps. Come on, guys. Let's build this muscle, which I think is really important as well, because again, in our world, we see a lot of people who build a business to varying degrees of success. And then at the end of it, they kind of go, well, what was that about? And so we want to make sure that they've got that answered and they've got a pathway to be able to. They've got the runway that you talk about in your book. And I think that's really going to be key. So, Damion, firstly, I want to say thank you to you for taking the time out of your day to come and hang with us. You've been incredibly generous. Ladies and gents, I'd really commend all Damion's books to you. The two I can personally tell you that have been terrific for me have been Reinvented Life and The Quick and Dirty Guide to Gold and Silver. I'm a self-confessed noob when it comes to gold and silver. It's not my area of expertise. But I really do think that there's some simple things to take away from both of those books that you can apply dramatically to your own life. And so for whether you're at that point where you need to reinvent your life or you just want to get to the point where you don't ever have to need to reinvent your life, there's some tremendous learnings in here that Damion's going to be able to share with you. And please do head across to the website.
Reinvention.net.
Reinvention.net, thank you. And grab that workbook. That's going to be your friend. It's going to be your guide. It's going to be your Sherpa as you go through your own journey. Damion, mate, thank you. You're a wonderful guest. You're a wonderful human being. I love the work that you're doing. I think it's important work. It's valuable work. And long may that continue, my friend.
Thank you very much, Jesse. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.